punked
Oh,
out.
my.
Well,
I got to check on her.
absolutely feel free to check on her, and we hope she's well and recovers soon.
Clearly the priority.
Yeah.
Yes, that is
That's what all the
definitely
good news I'm
priority.
giving. You don't have to worry about anything.
What's that?
So
I
I'm
gotta
giving all
check
this
on
good
Bev.
news. You're all set. You don't have to worry about anything.
I gotta step away to check on Bev because she's shopping on Amazon.
Oh.
Yeah.
And
That
I'm
is
here.
def-
Yeah.
Uh-oh.
that is definitely dangerous.
Yeah, Amazon has been the go-to place lately.
They they benefited greatly from the pandemic. That's for
Oh,
sure.
no question. And you know what? I think people will continue to shop there because it's easy.
Oh, yeah. Once they get in the habit, they're not going to
Yeah.
change.
The only thing is, with clothing, you need to know what the fit is, because returning things is a pain in the neck.
Built
And
into the business model.
with shoes, you really need to try them on, because even if you have a brand that you like and you buy different styles within the same brand, fit differently.
Exactly.
Sure.
Yeah.
And nothing is worse than shoes that hurt your feet. But everything else, no problem.
So we're just waiting for
Greg and Peggy?
Two more.
Yeah, I was really not sure I could make it in time. Maybe I was going to be a half hour late, but it all worked out. It took her in early, and she's been waiting several months to have this surgery. So even up here in Massachusetts, it's still a mixed bag. They are accepting some, elected surgery, so-called.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But at least Massachusetts is not nearly as hot as it was
Right.
thinking about coming back. And then all of a sudden it kind of reversed, and now Florida's a mess.
Well,
And you're just outside of the city, right?
I'm sorry?
I say you're just outside of the city.
Yeah, 20 miles from downtown, so it's half an hour. But we have 100 colleges and universities within, I think, it's a 30-mile radius of Boston. And it's all kids. And it's a real difficult time. I think it's good because the colleges have got to do something about reducing tuition fees. It's been out of control for years.
Agreed.
Outside of that, I can tell you, I think the heat finally came up from Florida. We're going to be in our mid 80s today.
we're in the mid-90s, so shut your mouth. That's a cool wave.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
last week we've
My
had,
friends, right, they're up in the mid 90s also.
oh yeah, the whole country is hot. But up until yesterday, we were in the 60s and low 70s.
That's pretty cool for this time of year.
It is, it is. Yeah. Then I saw the announcement by, I think his name is Schellenberger, one of the 30-year activists on climate change and climate control. And he came out with, since he had to go under oath, he admitted that the whole climate change thing has been propagated by climate alarmists, and it's not nearly as bad as everybody thought. It's like,
They keep pushing it out a little bit now, aren't they?
I mean, what? That's unbelievable. I mean, and he went down a list of like 15 things that were exaggerated or wrong. Like, humanity is on a death spiral in 6 years or 8 years or 20 years or more. But other things I had never even thought of, which is the food supply for humanity has been increasing. It's not decreasing. And warm weather has helped it.
Right.
And he had to admit some have talked about that emissions in the US and Europe have been declining for the last 10 years. And that
So the
problem
new
is
Green Deal
obviously.
is not the second coming, huh?
No,
Yeah, it was astounding. If you see the release, it was just absolutely astounding. I mean, I don't know what to make of it, you know?
Too much.
well, we knew that there are issues, but we also knew that they were not near, I mean, anyone who was logical knew they weren't nearly as desperate
Uh,
as some people were painting it out to be.
Well, but there was a lot of money involved. Al Gore made, they say, between 75 and $100 million on his
You
whole.
mean after he developed the internet?
That's right. Exactly.
Yep, good old Al.
We are live, so
Okay.
just, everyone's watching.
Yeah.
Shall we begin?
Yep, Peggy, I think, is on her, trying to get some technical difficulties addressed. She's on her way up here to log in, I guess. So we could get started and then go from there.
Commissioner David, can you actually see us this time?
Yes.
Oh, okay. That's a first, right?
No, last time I saw you also.
Oh. Oh, really? Okay.
I can see you.
Okay, good.
Okay, do we need to start with the roll call as a normal meeting? Okay,
Anelda, you're on mute. There you go.
Okay,
shall we call the roll?
you're gonna call the meeting to order?
Yes, call the meeting to order at 1:35.
Thank you. Commissioner Shoemaker,
Here?
Commissioner David,
Present.
Vice Mayor Bobby,
Present.
Mayor Hillman,
Present.
Town Attorney Tercivia,
Here.
Town Manager Labadie.
Present.
Thank you.
We'll move to the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag.
Yeah.
I pledge
Pledge allegiance
To the
flag
flag
Of the United States
States of America,
and to
to
the
the
republic
republic
For which it stands, one nation,
under God,
under God,
indivisible,
indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
I do not have the agenda in front of me, but I assume we can just move right on to the subject at hand. So
We
I
sure can.
turn it over to you, Marshall.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much. As I said in my brief email to everybody, this is a great budget presentation I get to make here with Matt. We poured over all the numbers again, as I indicated, to make sure we get the precision in our numbers. So when we say give this presentation today, everyone can feel comfortable with what we're saying. So the good news is, in accompanying the CAFR, which is our comprehensive annual financial report that we submitted on Tuesday, our financial position is strong. We have financial position. So that kind of sets the stage that our budget year is much better than initially anticipated, that we discussed in the collective bargaining meeting. So our position has improved since that meeting, once we fine-tuned all the numbers and were able to work from the property appraisers numbers and then the projections that Matt was able to provide for us. So if we want to queue up the presentation, we'll kind of jump into this. And how I imagine we'll do this is I will go sheet by sheet, get more insights on that. If you have any questions, I guess we can go in that fashion to handle some questions. I'll stop kind of periodically. There'll be natural breaks in the presentation where we can have discussions, or something jumps up on you, just let us know. Again, this budget, we are continuing to work to protect our unique sense of place. So I think we've continued to do this in my second budget that I'll be presenting to the commission for review and approval. So if we could go to that first slide and kind of give a quick overview. And what we're seeing is that we're going to actually be proposing a slight decrease in the millage rate. That's really because of a decrease in the debt service millage. Again, the debt service millage is directly related to amortization schedules for our 5 outstanding debt issues. So when Matt calculated those numbers and moved through it, it's only 1/100th of a mil, so it's not a huge decrease, but by law, that has to match the debt obligation is. So there'll be a slight change in that debt service millage rate, and that brings it down. And then based on the 2.46% growth in property values as projected by the property appraiser, we got $173,000 in the growth of the tax roll. That's really in the ad valorem. The budget gap, we're recommending that it be filled with the use or pledging of reserves. Again, if we looked at the CAFR, we had a net growth of $552,000. So that was additional reserves. We added to the reserves at the closeout of the fiscal 2019 year. So we're suggesting at this point that we could fill that gap by pledging the use of reserves in the amount of $208,000. So that's a good number that I'm glad that I could present, that after we went through with all the department heads and their hard work, we were able to get the budget to that structural gap of only being 208 out of balance, for which we're suggesting pledging reserves to do that. Again, other overviews or highlights. The fire rescue budget, we're projecting a 7% increase, which that would be $313,000 increase in the budget. The funding of salaries and benefits under the collective bargaining agreements, those are still open. So we would put in some numbers, projections in there to kind of look at that. And then we're assuming a healthcare insurance increase of about 10%. As we recall, last year we had a 0% increase in healthcare. We're not anticipating that's going to happen again, as I've indicated in the past, that our is suggesting that we'll see an increase somewhere in the 8 to 12%. So we stuck with the 10% as the projection number for healthcare cost increase. And then the funding of capital projects, the 2 capital projects, the crosswalk project in its modified form. We'll again revisit that at a future commission date as to what that really looks like. Is still in the discretionary sales tax budget, and we've inserted a place using next year's contribution, the newer contributions even reduced, but we're still going to get some funds again to replace the town hall roof, because that is fallen into deteriorated to a point where we really can't maintenance it any longer. So we're going to need to do that. So we put the capital. So again, those 2 capital projects again are in the discretionary sales tax budget. That is not on our general fund budget. So as we move through this, as commissioners, if there are projects that you've identified or believe need to be identified or addressed or added to this, that would then change this this position of $208,000 to 208. We'd have to increase that if we were to add any special projects or any other capital projects to the general fund portion. I do have one highlighted for consideration, and that would kind of be, if we add that project in, that would increase the additional use of reserves. But again, the closeout of that 2019 fiscal year, we added $552,000 to the reserves that would bring our unassigned reserve fund balance, unassigned fund balance, up to 52% for operating. And that's a very good number to have as a backdrop for this conversation. Next slide. Again, so that would, again, our millage rate then would basically be held flat, or that 1/100th of a mil reduction to 3.7876. And again, you see the reduction 0.099119. So that's a slight reduction there. Next slide. This is the assessed value. Again, you have seen those projections from the property appraiser. Our assessed value went up 2.4% growth, 2.46% growth to basically $7 billion is our assessed value for which we project our revenues for the year. And we had a net new value of $22.7 million, and that's basically new constructions, additions, renovations, things that added to the tax roll. Next. So then you see our tax rates. So all of this stuff with COVID, all the financial uncertainty and changes, and we'll get a little more into those details in later slides. We are at this point representing a budget where it has no effect upon our millage rate and our position to deliver services to the community. So that's good. Again, we as a leadership team here did go through and pencil out things that we thought were not necessary. So we're really giving you an expense side of the budget that is pretty tight. So, and then we get into those in August where we'll do our line by line review. But as we added all that together, again, we're looking out that our tax rate is basically flat, not changed. And we're again using pledging the reserves to fill the 208 difference between revenues and expenses. Next. This is how our Highland Beach taxes are divided. Again, of all of your tax bill, and this is good for residents at home also that are watching. The conversation we have are 22% of your total tax bill that you see that you get from the county. Only 22% comes to us. So when you talk about how much tax your tax assessment is in total, we only get 22% of it to fund operations. County and county schools are the lion's share, and then 10% for special districts. Now here are revenues. So what you have is, you'll see on the screen, you have the actuals from 2009, and those have been confirmed and audited actuals. So those are really good numbers to look at. 2020 that you see in that second column, that is our current operating budget, the current fiscal year. And then we have what we're working on now, which is next year's budget, which is 2021 budget. And then you'll see the whole host of revenue streams and how they're changing. Now you'll see things that you see in the red. Those are the things that are impacted by the pandemic, the impacts that we see with the economic fallout from that, where we're seeing the half cent sales tax, revenue sharing going down. And then, of course, interest on earnings are really the items that are getting that are impacted by the pandemic. And you'll see. But overall, we were able to see a revenue increase of about $414,000 year over year from 20 to 21. So we had some growth. So we were good in that position, that we at least some growth where other communities maybe a little more challenged by the economic fallout from the pandemic. But you see in there some of the other larger, we've got ad valorem tax increase. That's the 173 that we highlighted at the beginning of the presentation. The FP&L franchise fees, we're seeing an increase of about 85,000. And administrative reimbursements, we'll get to that. That's coming out of the building department. Since they have to go to a special revenue fund and be accounted for separately and audited as a separate fund, they have to provide some administrative fees for management, the other items that we provide to them, IT, HR, you could think like rent and all those other charges. So for them to be independent, they have to cover some of the other support service costs that go into that. And then at the bottom, you see the 208. That's the appropriation from reserve, or the pledge of reserves to fill out what we needed to balance the budget. Next. There you go. There you see our revenue streams. Again, property tax, as everyone knows, pretty much is 81% of our general fund. So that's our lion's share of revenue. And then you see all the other ones kind of identified as smaller sums in there, with franchise fees coming in next. And then our solid waste fees, again, we're projecting solid waste costs that we would be adjusting those rates by 3% for that contract extension. So that's where you saw a little bit of growth from the solid waste side. Next. General fund expenditures. So this is the general fund categories that we budget year over year, and you can see some of the changes again. As one would anticipate, the largest change in any one budget area is going to be fire rescue services, and we're projecting that at 7. And that's what I told you we presented to you all. That 5-year projection is that we're just going to estimate 7. Unless there's a change that we will be discussing at our next meeting, we're going to keep it at 7 until we get some better numbers from Delray. But we're projecting right around a 7% increase and trying to stay conservative as we take our first run through on the expenditure side here. Everything else is relatively in good control. Police went up, 1%. So we're public safety is really controlling that. So everything else is relatively in line. There's nothing that really jumps off the page on increases. Solid waste, again, there's expenses that we have to provide back to waste management for the collection of those services. Next slide.
Would you back up for a second, please,
Sure.
Marshall? The
Yeah.
OGG, non-departmental?
Yeah. Yeah, that's just basically all of our, you'll see insurance. Matt, what was the other one that we saw jump up on in the OGG?
Insurance was a big part, and also communication costs.
Yes, our communication costs for AT&T, things of that nature, all of our fiber services into the building. Some of those costs went up, especially when we're anticipating we want to add a little bit more capacity in our fiber, and that's going to cost us a little bit more. We're having some trouble on that front. But again, OGG is pretty much in line, but that's everything that doesn't really fit into one specific operational category, kind of supports everybody, if you will, kind of like a support services budget area. Did I answer your question, sir?
How much of the roughly 400,000 is insurance?
Overall, or of the increase?
Of the overall 397,000, how much of that is insurance?
About 120.
So you're anticipating essentially a 10% increase across the board then?
No, that wasn't a 10% increase. It was.
Well, you're looking at a 9.8% increase on the category, and insurance is share, but insurance you've got in at 10%. Everything
that
else
was-
has to be at 10%.
This isn't the health insurance. This is all the other kinds of insurance.
Property.
Oh,
Insurance,
gotcha.
auto insurance, workers' comp, general.
Oh, okay, I got you now. So,
It's not the health insurance. And we don't expect too many dramatic increases in there, except for a bit of an uptick on the property insurance. That's sort of to be anticipated every year, at least some degree of property insurance increase.
I wasn't so focused on the 35,000 as much as I was on the 9.8%, quite honestly. Just kind of stuck out like a sore thumb. Okay.
And again, just to let all of you know too, is when we get into our August workshops, you'll get details to every item. So, again, this is us kind of a coalescing all of the numbers in on a bigger scale. Kind of, we'll jump into in August each of the individual line items within each of these expenditure areas. So you'll see what is constituted in the 7 or 8 expense accounts for the commission and the town manager, clerk, finance, legal, things of that nature. So we'll be able to get into those real details at our workshops. But as a follow-up to this, I'll be glad to, Matt and I will send an email out to the commission, kind of what this OGG, what's in there, give you a little more details as a heads up.
That'd be great. Thank you.
So moving on, next slide, if I could. Okay, then that just kind of shows you that as we all anticipated, 60%, 62% of our budget does fall to public safety. And then all of the other pieces that you see in there kind of are the rest of your operating costs in the general fund. So again, lion's share does fall to public safety. And of that, 40% is the fire rescue services. Next. Again, there's even a further glance at taking a bird's eye approach to it, that personnel expenses, operating expenses. Now within that operating expense line includes the fire services contract. That's why operating expenses look like they're more than personnel services and things of that nature. But operating expenses is the entirety of the fire service contract. And then you can see in capital outlay, we add any capital to the general fund. You'll see when we talk about capital projects here, we talk about capital in the water and sewer side of the operation, which are revenue funds. So, here's what we're looking at here, and you'll see the increases. And again, in personnel services, a lot of that increase is tied to the insurance and some uncertainty around personnel costs, but you can kind of see where the growth is there. Fund balance. This is always a great slide. So our fund balance position, again, is strengthened. You'll see the blue is growing, which is, the unassigned is growing. As we said, we added 552,000 closeout. So I can't stress that enough. That was a budget that was in place when I got here. And, again, you had pledged $698,000 of reserves in that budget. We turned that upside down on its head and actually added, instead of using 700,000, we added 552,000. So for a $1.2 million change in operation. So I'm impressed with our staff and Matt. We were able to kind of turn that equation around and add to our net position rather than decrease from it. So I'm quite impressed with staff that we were able to make that happen through fiscal conservatism and really taking a look at doing what we really need to do and really fine tuning projects that we undertake and the expenses that we out the door. Next slide. Again, there's the unassigned fund balance in the general fund. We're up to 1.8%. I'll round for purposes of conversation. So we're at 52% of operating. We have an unassigned fund balance. That's a good position to be in. You got, again, our fiscal position is strong. The community should feel very comfortable that we're able to weather this storm with some ease and continue to deliver the services the residents want. But again, we went from 49% to 52%, so we 3% increase. That's that 552. And again, that's what we're saying. We use a little bit of that to bridge the gap next year. Next slide. Now this is the building department. Now this is a special revenue fund rather than an enterprise fund that we see with water and sewer. The special revenue fund. We started setting that up last year. If you look into here, there's a little bit of transfer in from us, if you will, on the accounting side to take care of some of the costs in the building department that truly are not building related. And that's some of the costs related to the town planner that she does work outside of the scope of the building department and permits. So she's about a 50-50 employee where 50% of her time is on development and permit plan reviews and zoning type actions, which fit into the building realm. Her true planning items, we transfer in money. However, countering that transfer in, there's a transfer back to us in the administrative side, and that's in the operating expenses. So there is a administrative charge that moves out of the building fund to us. Matt and I noticed that there's a number missing, so we'll tweak this to balance it. So basically, as we're budgeting, the building department, based on these projections, will be adding a little bit into their reserve fund for slower years. So that's good that they moving to the special revenue fund will then start to have a little bit of a reserve on their end to carry them forward in down years. So again, isolating the general fund from their operational fluctuations and changes, they kind of stand alone based on the permit fees. So again, at the closeout though, it was a big year for building in 2019 where we collected $921,000. We budgeted $773 this year. Working with Jeff, our building official, he's really thinking we're right around 830 is a comfortable number, and we'll see as we get closer to the closeout of 20, what that number is. And as we get in through our budget season, we'll be able to fine tune that number a little bit as we look at it. So again, this is that hybrid model that we highlighted in the CAFR, the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, that this model allows us to ramp up services when there's high demands and then turn it down when there isn't. So we use CAP Government Services as our provider of inspection services. So again, it allows us a little bit more control to match changes in the marketplace. Next. Discretionary sales surtax. This is the county fund that's created through sales tax that allows us to do capital projects. So you'll see the budget in there. We're in 2020 so far. The construction of crosswalks stalled based on the cost that came back from the proposal from the RFP. So we're still working on that. We did get some unfortunate news. It's not all dead, but the governor did had to take a look at expenses in the state budget and did cut out most of the appropriation requests from all communities for the most part, cut $1 billion out. It did get our crosswalks project out of funding. But we'll be talking about that at our next meeting to re-request that into the next year's fiscal budget. So, but we do still have the amount of funds that we were going to contribute available. That's kind of to match that scaled down version of the project in some format. And we will have that conversation on one of our future meetings as to what that crosswalk project may look like, or if we delay it slightly to see next year's appropriation request or something in between. We have that ability to do that. And then for the contributions that come in, the $215,000 that we are getting next year, we are requesting to use that for a new roof on Town Hall. So that keeps the roof project out of the general fund, puts it into the sales tax. It's a qualifying expense or project, and we can get the roof hopefully installed right early in October once we get through the budget process and we get that in place. The roof is in pretty bad shape, leaking all over the place, like I've indicated before. It's beyond repair, and we're just chasing leaks at this point. So the idea would be to replace the roof. Next slide. Water Enterprise Fund. We're charges for service projecting about a 3% increase in revenue. So that's basically charges for water sales. And then the expenses relatively on par and in control. From last year over year, reducing their capital requests. So we were able to move some things around in the capital side of the equation and reduce some costs there. And our budget's balancing in pretty much at last year's numbers, which are good. But we're showing a balanced budget. I know that we've had the discussion of the water sewer rate study that should be coming to us shortly. And we'll have that discussion also as a group as to what that looks like or if there are modifications we need. So basically, the items on the Water Enterprise Fund is a 3% increase in rates. Basically projecting off the last year's sales or the budgeted or projected sales for this year. So we didn't make any assumptions on changing the rates, but this would be where it is. And again, another big equation that we continue to talk about within the water budget is that debt service charge you see at $1.5 million. So those were conversations we had last year that I think we need to revisit, or it was the intent of the commission to revisit with the water and sewer rate study to see how we look at that. And we'll be having those conversations as well this summer. Next slide, please. Sewer rate, the same thing. We're not assuming any changes in rate, just a 3% as recommended in our last user study from 2015. So we make those changes, do a few projections, and we balance out at 1.9 million in revenues, 1.9 in expenses. But we did see an increase in some capital charges there. Again, when we look at the capital charges, that is the sewer project that's kind of undetermined until we complete the evaluation. We don't really know the complete number or real accurate number of what we need to do. So we kind of have that, if you will, circled in the budget at this point. We don't know what it's going to cost to fix that system. My guess is that if it's as bad as some assume, or project is of scale that we assume, we would then have to be looking at a referendum question at some point. When? We don't know yet. But right now, we're tying up all the contract ends with the contractor to go televise here, hopefully sometime in the next 6 to 8 weeks. And then within the budget season, we'll have an idea of what it looked like to see how we want to plan moving forward. Next slide. Unrestricted net positions for water and sewer. Water pretty much equal to last year, slight increase in sewer. Again, you'll get more details to that in the CAFR, but our asset position is still holding strong. Next. Here are the capital projects. So there is a capital project over in the Public Works building. So that project is split between the building department and water and sewer funds to put in some new carpet in those buildings. It's reached its life cycle, looking a little aged. We added the dollars in to do that. We have discretion. If you look on the left is the important part, what fund it's coming out of. So that part of the carpet cost is coming out of the building department budget, not the general fund. You see the replace town roof, continuation of crosswalks, that's in the discretionary sales tax. Then we get to the sewer fund. We got a rehab lift station #1. Again, a lot of that is kind of more of a vulnerability, resiliency type project where we have to not only repair what's kind of aged within the lift station, but also elevate that out of the storm surge zones and give it some strengthening. Sewer laterals and linings, you see that to be determined placeholder there because we don't know until we take a look at it, but that's something we need to probably pencil in some numbers, whether it's the engineering and design side or some type of construction. Wastewater collection system pipe rehab, it's the stormwater side. It's kind of mislabeled. I'll change that a little bit. There are, that's the sanitary wastewater, sorry. Phase 1 is on the side streets, doing a little bit of rehab project on the sewer systems on our secondary road system that is aged. So it's a 2-phase project. Phase 1 this year, phase 2 the next year out. Stormwater, those are tide valves, tide flex check valves. That's so stormwater. So basically when the seas rise, they don't back up into our storm system and they're back up our storm system. So it keeps the water out. So you have about $425,000 there in the sewer enterprise fund on their project side. And in the water side, we got the east chiller. We have the west chiller that's this year. That'll be at your next meeting is to approve the purchase of the budgeted west chiller. Replace two chemical storage day tanks that are deteriorating. We got to replace those. Rehab shallow injection wells and replace Public Works office carpeting. That's their contribution for the other part of that carpet project. They're matching with the building department. And then on the bottom, you'll see something that I've circled that's kind of an outline project. And the reason why is our monument signs on the north and south end of town are rotting. Next time you go for a walk, go in there and take a look. So I've thrown a number out there. This is probably something to be a significant upgrade from what you see today. But if we want to add this type of project to replace those signs, then we would have to use reserves at that point and/or revisit our conversation on millage rates to handle this project. To kind of give you a counterbalance to the monument signs, you may say 250 is too much. To replace the signs as they are now with new ones, I mean, you could change the font, but to have signs that look just like it, you're about $5,000 a sign to just use the cedar wood signs. If they do fall apart before we get to approving such a project, that's kind of, replace in kind is a significantly less cost. This also, the monument signs also includes the town hall sign and would include a electronic board of some sort on the town hall sign to get messages out to the community. We'll be able to put that out front where you can announce dates, events, something happening in town, to have some type of scroll board on that. So that's why the numbers, what we see there. Next slide. So where do we go from here? So we've had I'm going to present this and then turn it over to all the questions. So this is on next Thursday, the FAB will get the same presentation. We'll be able to answer some of their questions. They're also going to get a copy of the CAFR to look at that. So Matt and I will be working with them through these presentations, see what their comments and get their feedback and concerns. We return on the 21st of this month to set tentative maximum millage rate. That means the millage rate that we put in, regardless of what we do, we can always go lower, but we can't go any higher. So we'll be revisiting the budget yet again on the 21st. And that would be to set a resolution for the maximum rate. You could either go with the rate from the recommendation that you'd be pledging reserves, or you can go with a slightly higher amount. Again, this is a number we can't exceed. So you can take that, raise the millage rate by the 208. That just holds our maximum. We can't go any higher at that day and then work our way down, or you can just keep it as is. And August 6th and August 13th will be our heavy lifting on line item budget reviews, where we'll get into each of the department budgets, each of the revenue sources, and have dialogue if we need. To what extent, we'll see. That'll be driven by you all. And we'll have those meetings maybe the 20th if we can't get through an item or two, or we need to revisit or get more information. We have the 20th circled to as an optional if needed one. And then September 8th, we have our first public hearing. September 22nd, we have that second public hearing. So that's where we go from here. But before I open it up or turn it back over, again, I'm really that I can give you this presentation with the numbers that are contained in it, that really we don't need to raise the millage rate. The gap between revenues and expenses for next year is $208,000. So we're in good shape. We're starting off in a better position than we did last year. So I'm very pleased. I'm pleased with the hard work of our department heads. I can't thank Matt enough for continuing to be my voice on financial matters and keeping us on board and in line with the laws here. But this is a great budget to present, and I'm here for, as is Matt, to answer any questions or more feedback or discussion.
First of all, terrific job. Thank you, Matt. Thank you both. Pleasure to start out with something that is well thought through and a set of numbers that we can all deal with. Wonderful. A lot better than last year. Okay. Why don't we just kick it around? Who do we want to start with? Maybe we'll start with John.
Okay. I guess my first reaction was, why do we have to decrease the mill rate? I would prefer to keep it the same. Prefer to avoid having to use the reserve. Noted that we have some unknowns that we're dealing with because you've made some assumptions, as in the case of the half-cent sales tax and in state revenue sharing, about $315,000. Well, that could be cut a whole lot more, especially with the resurgence that we see. Could, I think, make the whole impact of the pandemic on Florida much worse than I think they were even thinking. If they were going forward with opening up and all that sort of thing, and now, this is becoming a bit of a problem. So it's an unknown. That's one. The other is the sewer system. That's another big unknown, and it could be significant, or it may not be necessary to go to a referendum, and we could deal with it if we have funds without going to a referendum. So another reason, honestly, not to decrease the mill rate. I could go through some other points, but that's my first and foremost concern, is the uncertainty of those issues that affect the mill rate. And I don't think this is a time to decrease, and I'm not suggesting we increase either. Now, I'll point out, I do see some other hotspots, to use that as currently in vogue expression. The whole fire rescue thing is really troubling. And obviously, I appreciate Commissioner Gossett-Seibman's complete comprehensive review of the status of the whole fire rescue mess. So that's a major issue. The water. I mean, we're losing money, no question. I don't think there's any reason why we should be losing money. That needs to be addressed. And then separately, I noticed the line item for recreational land acquisition. Tell me what that means.
Oh, you're saying like an expense line that kind of has nothing in it?
Well, it said recreational acquisition. I didn't know if you thought that at some point we're acquiring some land, or do we have any recreational facilities for the town?
No, what we do collect or have a fund. When we get into the other budgets, we do have some dollars that were collected with new developments that are for that purpose, for recreational land. We don't have enough money to do anything with, but we do have some dollars associated with it. So there are some open budget accounts for it, which we could use those dollars for certain activities, which we don't have proposed or haven't proposed. I'll try to get the number, or Matt will. He's looking feverishly down, so I'm guessing he's looking the digging there.
It's not a big issue. It was just a big question as to what was intended, meant, or what we should do to deal with it. But aside from that, I was thinking that maybe you were thinking it involved Milani Park, which is still, long-term, but an issue that we have to resolve somehow. And the whole thing with the beaches. There's nothing in here that addresses Milani Park or the beach problem, as well as the fire mess. So we have these kind of thorns in our side right now. It may not affect our budget. I hope it does in a positive way, anything. So that's what I also. The other thing is long-term debt. Boy, it would seem to me as a target, as a goal, as a desire, if nothing else, to eliminate that long-term debt as fast as we can. I don't know why we would need to carry debt, given the thriving metropolis that we have, given our status, given how we are in pretty good financial shape. In fact, if anything, I think we're in great financial shape, due in part because Finance Director Lala, I think the whole team has been doing an outstanding job. This is impressive. But I think as a goal, let's go a step further. Eliminate the debt. I mean, we're not talking, that much money that we couldn't resolve it over the next 3 to 5 years for sure. Even shorter than that. Lastly, reasons for non-collections of taxes. Could you just give me a kind of a sense for what's involved in non-collections, why they happen? Because I see there's a fluctuation. We did really well for a bit. We dropped off to like 97% or whatever. I just wanted to understand the difficulty with that.
Talk to that, Marshall.
Yes, sir.
The lack of collections really doesn't have a tremendous financial impact on the town, as when someone doesn't pay their property taxes, the tax collector, Palm Beach County tax collector, sells what they call a tax certificate. So they sell basically that debt plus a bid upon interest rate. And if the person does not pay that tax certificate off within a 2-year period, it can turn into a tax deed where they basically get that property for the taxes that they paid. So the tax collector sells those tax certificates and then distributes the money received from them back to the taxing jurisdictions. We really don't see much of an impact that way. The property within the town is certainly of high value, and anytime that somebody doesn't pay their property taxes, there are bidders out there who are more than willing to bid to those property taxes plus an interest rate to hopefully on their part, either get paid back the money that they invested in that tax certificate or get a very, very valuable property for a very cheap price.
So I get that.
That's sort of the mechanics of it.
Right. In the end, as a practice, we won't lose. It just takes long to get what we're supposed to get. But my point is, given what's going on with renters not being able to evict them, in fact, I think the governor is just extending the prohibition, I guess, against evicting people, which means landlords are not getting their money, which means I would think there's going to be less, there's going to be more people who will not pay their taxes. And are we accounting for that as a drop, that it could impact us more than probably in the last 10 years because of this unique situation of the pandemic?
It's not significant.
You don't think so?
No.
The-
Not here. We're very fortunate here.
Yeah, no,
commu-
for owners, but for renters, leave the speculators, or not the speculators, the investors on the hook, that could be a problem. I don't know. I just thought I'd mention it.
Yeah, but they're not going to chance losing their property.
No, I don't think they will. They'll take advantage of the time and not pay us. And so it'll just be elongated in terms of receipt.
I'm suggesting that would probably be the case in other communities, not so much here.
Okay, we'll see. Very good.
The primary reason for the difference between the property taxes we levy and the property taxes we receive is due to discounts that people take advantage of. Property taxes on December 1st and are getting a 4% discount on their taxes as opposed to waiting until the full bill is due on it.
Right. And I'm one of those, I pay early.
Sure, most people do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anybody who has a
Because when
mortgage company is required to pay it as early to maximize the discount.
Yeah, if you annualize the discount, it's substantial.
Yeah, again, the reason why I bring it up, and certainly in the Boston area, with the rental community being so big, it's a massive problem in terms of evictions, and owners who are will lose their properties because of it. It's a big deal. And I don't think it's reached yet the level of media attention that will. But I trust Mayor Hillman's comments that it shouldn't affect us.
Like you said, we'll see, but I don't think so. I think our situation here is dramatically different than it is in the Boston market with all of the universities and the high density of rental properties.
Very good. Well, those are my views, perspectives, as I went through as much as I could, the entire 109 pages or so. And this morning while my wife was in surgery. So I will do more diligence.
Thank you, John. Let's move on. Let's move on to Peggy. Peggy, what are your thoughts?
Sure, Mayor, thank you. Well, I will save a majority of my thoughts for the next meeting as my computer was not operating at home, and I apologize for the delay in joining the meeting, but I came to town hall.
No problem. We're just glad you made it.
Did not bring the dog. Thank you, sir. I do believe that maintaining the mill rate as is in this fiscal year would be a good idea to consider, because I think that residents would be understanding of that, though a decrease always sounds great to anyone. Maintaining it would be optimal in the sense that we do have some unknowns, the sewer being one of them. The crosswalks we'll talk about next week, and we will come back with that. It is not a done deal, as Marshall implied. And then we have the fire rescue, which everyone knows I would like to consider also next week. So I think maintaining the mill rate would be a very good consideration for us. As far as picking apart this, since we got a lot of this data earlier this morning, I'll need more time to review it. I do want to perhaps explain an item here that was brought up by John, the recreational, the reference to the recreational portion of the budget. So everyone knows, I think Glenn is the only one who was around at the time. But in 2018, the commission then, when I was new to it, discovered that there was a recreational tax assessed to, I believe it was to renovations and upgrades in the building department permitting, and that had not been assessed for many years in the past. And we implemented reconsidering and assessing that tax, and that particular budget could have been extraordinarily higher if it had been pursued by past commissions. So I want everyone to know that that was corrected in 2018. Otherwise, we would have had a much larger fund in that respect. So my comments.
Maggie, could you back up a minute on that again? I'm not quite following what occurred. Could you be a little more?
If Matt wants to weigh in, or Marshall, there.
It's basically, yeah,
In 2018, we determined, go ahead, Marshall, if you could elaborate here.
it's an impact fee. So when you have new development, not redevelopment of a pre-existing platted lot. So something you would
That's
see,
it. Thank you for correcting that.
they don't get an impact fee, but say
The
Golden
new development.
comes in, they have an impact fee and they would have to contribute a certain amount of funds. I don't know what that is off the top of my head. Into
Correct.
fund for recreational land. So we don't have a lot of new development, but if something was to come in that's new, you would have to pay that. So one undeveloped land, there's an impact fee. The county gets one too, for transportation. And then we have this smaller one for recreational lands. And
It's
in the
substantial.
fund, I don't know what the number is, Matt. I don't think it's,
Yeah, I can tell you the number. Right now, that has a fund balance. We track a special revenue fund. It's not a fund that we budget annually. It is just basically funds that are basically sitting in this special revenue fund. There's $231,122. So it's not an amount to do a tremendous amount with.
Right, my
Interesting.
point was, if there had been, when we did a look back, that fund had not been assessed on new building. It was new, not renovated, new building for many, many years. I don't have the data in front of me from that time,
Well, that's okay.
but I'm saying that that commission at that point, and when Marshall came on board, we made sure that we were assessing that fee on new construction. And it would have been an extraordinarily higher number if it had been taken care of in past times. Just pointing that out.
Got it.
Regardless of having a park or not, we had talked about at that time, we could do something with the funding, such as, an exercise trail within the property of the town, or just, if we acquired any lands, it was unrelated at the time to Milani, but assessing the fees is what we were hoping to do going forward, and we have done that.
Great. Thank you for bringing that up.
No
Appreciate
worries. And I think I'll
Okay.
reserve the rest of my comments for the next meeting then, when I've been able to go through this with the fine tooth comb.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
So that's it?
Oh, yes, sir. I will close with one story just to lighten the meeting. The South End Monument sign was run over by my carpool partner 10 years ago. And she paid to replace that. So I would request of the town, we save a splintered piece of it so that I may present to her. She's a Boca resident, not a Highland resident, so that I might present to her for her monies. I think she paid $500 to replace that sign.
I love it.
Thank
Very
you.
good. Okay. Evelyn, some comments?
Okay. Yeah, I do have a few comments. One is, I don't think we should lower the bill rate in general. I think that's a bad idea to do. But also, we have to look forward, because I believe that our assessed values for next year may be substantially lower because we're going to see lower selling prices. And I think we have to prepare for that possibility. So we certainly shouldn't lower it. I would even think about lowering it 0.01 or 0.01. So slightly, just so that we start to build a buffer. Again, with what John said about the unknowns in some of these projects, which could wind up costing multiples of what we have allowed for them. As far as this recreation thing, does that include if somebody buys a lot on the ocean side and knocks down a house that's there and then builds a new one? Do they have to pay the recreation fee?
Let me look into that with Colleen. I don't think so. I think it's once it's built, it's if preserve its spot. I have to see our language if we say if it's a substantial improvement or expansion of
Okay,
approved use.
because
Yeah.
the reason I bring that up is in many places, if you completely knock it down, it's considered new construction, which is why I know a lot of people who left one wall or 1.5 walls up when they basically rebuilt the house, because there were tax considerations if they didn't knock the whole thing down.
Yeah.
And
I will give a
don't know.
report.
Yeah, I don't know how Florida handles that.
I will
Okay.
give you a report.
Then I agree that the water and sewer rates should be raised. I think we are way lower than we need to be. And I think people should pay for what they use. The town shouldn't back it up. Okay, now I have a question. I'm delighted that we put money into the reserves and didn't use it up. But part of what's in there isn't the 200 and some odd $1,000 that we had allocated for the crosswalks. So wouldn't, when you figure out how much you really have to work with or how much more we have, I would think you need to not count that because that's already been allocated. So if we do the crosswalks, it's immediately gonna pull $250,000 out of there. No, okay.
No,
Commissioner,
basically
that
what we
is-
did on, what's that, Matt?
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say on the crosswalks, we moved that entirely into the discretionary sales tax account. So we don't have any general fund reserves tied to that project. We could, if the project got more than we could handle with the discretionary sales tax fund. But again, that would basically, the way we have it budgeted would be like 90,000 as far as we could go out of the reserves before then we'd have to hit a referendum. So we moved it all over into the discretionary sales tax is leveraged to the state dollar. So we don't have any general fund reserves associated with that project.
So then what you're saying is we could spend more than 350 by using the special fund and general reserves, that we're limited to 350 from general reserves or in total?
We can only, no matter what reserves of local funds, we're capped at 349,999. So,
Got it.
but if the state gave us earmarked dollars specifically for a project,
That's different, I understand.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
completely separate.
Mhm.
Okay, well, I will say that we are definitely in a much better place than we were last year. And I think you guys did a great job on this.
I had one point.
Can I hold you and let Greg speak?
Yes.
Evelyn, are you finished?
I'm finished.
Okay, on to Greg.
Thank you, sir. I'll be direct with it all. I got a lot of comments, and thank you for actually calling me a little later because I can comment on a few of what some of the other commissioners said.
You're more than welcome.
Long-term debt. Our long-term debt is at silly low rates. Like our average rate for most of our debt is 2%. There's no need to eliminate it ahead of schedule. Let it run off. We have almost free money. So it's foolish to try to pay it off over 5 years. So I'm not a fan of that. Holding the millage rate flat certainly makes sense to me. We have a decrease in the debt service millage rate, so I guess that means to hold the millage rate flat, we're technically increasing the general millage rate a little bit. Fine, if you want to do that, keep it flat, that's fine. If you want to just decrease it that ever so slight amount by holding our general millage rate flat and decreasing the debt millage rate, I'm fine with that too. They're both kind of the same thing. So all good there. It is important to realize where we are. We're at 52% of our budget is reserves. We are now bordering on the obscene, the absurd, if you look at us versus other towns. Same points I made last year. We have a lot of excess resident money sitting around, a lot, way more than most other towns. You could make a pretty strong financial argument to give some of it back. You could. I'm not making that argument only because there is a lot of uncertainty out there, but I can't stress it enough. We are getting to absurd levels of amount of reserves we have. So there is no reason to raise the millage rate and squirrel away more residents' money. It's becoming ridiculous. We got to not be afraid to use reserves for some occasional shortfalls like this year, the 200 grand. What happens is money tends to go in reserves, and then it becomes almost like this very uncomfortable situation for a lot of people to say, well, let's use some of that money out of reserves. We're okay, we can do it. We're at 52%. We really should be trying to use some money out of reserves for the next few years. I'm not concerned at all about taxes not getting paid. Properties are selling like mad. I don't know if you guys are speaking to realtors. I'm speaking to a lot of realtors, and part of it is because they're now all calling me like crazy to help find properties to buy. The 5 realtors that call me pretty much on a weekly basis have all had their biggest or their busiest 3 months of their entire careers. We're talking 20+ years. Properties now in our little town are going above ask. I've had multiple realtors come to me and say, for certain properties where I know the owners, they've literally said, just ask the owner if he'll name a price. We'll pay it. Not a problem. So I think the chance of the property values actually going down is smaller than what we might all be fearing. I think it's going to become a very bifurcated market. Northeast is very different, and New York and Boston, Massachusetts, all they're very different than what's going on in our little area of the world at the moment. Very different. And by the way, it's not just Highland Beach, it's Central Boca. Stuff that was sitting on the market in Central Boca all got snatched up literally in the last 30 to 45 days. So I really don't think we have to worry about property values going down. Don't overly panic about the fire rescue is another opinion of mine. I'll save my comments for the next commission meeting when we talk a little bit more about the fire rescue, but I don't think we have to be overly panicked on where that's going. I think there are some avenues for us on that. There's always a reason to kind of panic and raise the millage rate. We can come up with tons of reasons, whether it's COVID or property values or this or that, or whatever else it might be. I don't think we need to panic. Last year, I was the only one that said, let's not raise the millage rate. Everyone else said, raise the millage rate. We had that $600,000 shortfall last year that we were told we were going to have. I said it back then, there's no way we're having a $600,000 shortfall. It's going to be less. It was a lot less than even I expected. I didn't expect it to be 500,000 in our pockets, but I expected it to be 100 grand shortfall, 200 grand shortfall, not the 600. So we panicked last year. We raised it. It's fine. We did, but it's just, it kind of played out the way I thought it was going to play out. We didn't need to do it, and we did it. So we really don't need to be raising the millage rate anytime soon. Don't forget, we have some relatively large high tax properties coming on the market in 2020 and 2021. Drive around Bellito. These are not cheap homes. These are going to have massive taxes that they're going to be paying, property taxes. There's a few homes going up on the ocean, same sort of thing. In my old community in Ocean Place Estates, a whole bunch of owners just put their properties on the market. They literally just mushroomed all and came on the market in the last, whatever, few months. The reason is because buyers are going crazy and asking people, will you please put your house on the market so I can buy it? If a few of those properties sell, that's going to increase the taxes as well. So we might actually get a bump in tax revenue from some of these very high value homes. You know, a $15 million home offsets a lot of damage that can be from condos. So in closing, I don't think there's any mathematical or financial reason to raise the millage rate. Just two other little comments. I think spending $250,000 for new signs is personally, in my opinion, a complete waste. I actually don't even like the idea of an electronic sign at the town. We got that board for the police chief a while ago. I think actually, I think the foundation paid for that, or maybe the town paper, I don't remember. That even doesn't get a lot of use. So to pay a lot of money for another electronic sign doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And also to spend too much money on monuments doesn't make a lot of sense to me either. And one last comment, knocking down walls and leaving one wall in a house. Those rules changed I don't know if it was a few years ago or 2 years ago. They no longer allow that. Now it's a percentage of the house that's getting replaced. So there was a workaround for that now, so you can't get away with that anymore. I don't know if that's a county rule, it's not a town rule, or maybe it's a Florida rule, I'm not sure, but I don't think we have to worry too much about that anymore. That's it.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor.
And I have no strong opinions on this topic, in case you can't tell.
Let me run through some of your comments.
Yes,
I
sir.
agree, I disagree, I disagree, I agree. I am in agreement with most of what you said in reality. I'm very pleased to hear about the demand for the single family homes. I have not seen that though on the condo side. Now, of course, one $15 million single family home makes up for a number of condos. So that's really, really good news. And I hope it plays out that way. It would be wonderful. The situation on monument signs, I totally agree. I think our town wants to be understated, not overstated, on virtually everything that we do and show. So I do believe that we need to replace those signs. They are beyond their useful life, I think is the terminology. But I don't see building large monument signs. I think we do a nice understated presentation. So we should look into doing that, put it in the budget for next year. I don't know that they're 5,000 a piece, maybe they're 10,000 a piece, but they're clearly not humongous monument signs. And others on the commission might think otherwise, but I think already two of us think no. Okay.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, sure.
I guess then that means that we're not going to have elaborate wrought iron gates at either end of town.
Hardly, no. No. In terms of the water rates and sewer rates, we need to take a look at those charts that were passed out, I don't know, 4 or 5 months ago, whether we get the study in time or not. If we don't get it in time, I do think we need to visit those rates with an eye towards increasing them. We are significantly low on the sewer rates, as I recall. And I don't think the eye is towards balancing our budget. I think the eye is towards being more competitive, and it is a revenue source that we need to look at more closely. If the study is in time, we can certainly use that as a tool or it's helping us make a decision. If not, I think we make a decision based on the competitive environment. My feeling on the mill rate, I see no reason to drop our rate. And based on what our budgets look like right now, for your first pass, I don't see a reason to raise it either. You know, in terms of holding it steady, makes sense to me. I also agree with what our vice mayor was saying about where we stand with our reserves. I don't know if the word absurd applies. Okay, that might be a little aggressive. Well, let's say at any rate, we are in extremely good shape, but I think we might want to entertain a discussion on what are our reserves for. Why do we have reserves? What are they intended for? I believe they are there to take care of needed projects. They're not there only for emergencies. They're there to take care of capital requirements. They're there to take care of issues that need to be cared for that are not, where funds are not available in our normal annual operating budgets. It's not just for emergencies. So when we do have a capital requirement and it's not covered in the budget, we use the reserve for it. And from time to time, we can use it to pledge to balance our budget. There's no problems with doing that. And whether it's 200,000 or 600,000, we have the money to do it and we shouldn't shy away from doing it. And I don't think we need to, raise our mill rates to feed reserves that aren't necessary. We're super healthy. And I see Greg nodding his head there.
Yeah.
We're in a very fortunate position. So the reserves are there. Let's not shy away from using them when the need arises. Okay. What else do I have on here? I think it was Evelyn that was talking about we need to look to the future, and certainly John led off with that. We definitely do. There are a number of known unknowns, but there are also the unknown unknowns that bother me all the time. And but fortunately, we've got the reserves for that. I don't think we need to raise our mill rate to cover those things because we're sitting with good reserves. So all in all, I think you fellas did a wonderful job preparing us for the first pass on this. And we're clearly in very good shape. And it should be a very smooth move through the budget process this year. Great shot, great shape, really good job. And I don't think any of the commissioners are very far apart conceptually on any of this.
No, I don't think so.
Any comments from, oh, John, you wanted to say something else.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, actually, I was responding to the point made earlier about signs. I definitely think signage is really cool if you want to attract a lot of people to the town.
We don't want to do that.
However,
I love it when people say Highland Beach, where is that?
Oh,
but I can see the sign saying, bicyclists welcome. Like, oh my God. The other thing is, I do think we need to replace the signs. And, you had, what was it, 250,000? I think, even 30,000 times 2 plus the town, 75,000 max, I think is the kind of number I'm thinking. But we absolutely should do signage renewal, I guess you would call it.
But excuse me, are we all in agreement that they should be understated?
oh,
Yeah.
Yes,
yes.
Exactly what they are now, but an
Yes.
understated, welcome to Highland Beach, not a grandiose statement.
Right.
classy, elegant, understated.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
With the new logo,
So
Absolutely, with the new logo, for
Yeah.
sure.
Indian tile.
We'll,
to continue,
we go to take a look at it.
I will reinforce my point about the reserves in that we should protect the reserves that we have. Yes, we should look at using them when it makes sense. But, Mayor Hillman, your comment about the unknown and the unknowns that we don't know about. Hurricanes, issues that could affect us, the unknown impact of the pandemic still to be revealed, separate from the impact on revenue sharing and the sales tax, 1.5 cent deal. We're going to take an impact on revenue somehow, some way, and we may see it in different ways. So I'm in favor, at least given we have so many unknowns and some potential issues going forward, that at least for now, we want to protect it, not add to it necessarily. And yeah, we might want to use some of it specifically for sewage if we can avoid a referendum. I admit my first thought when I was going through this package,
John,
Yes.
John, it doesn't matter where the money comes from. If you spend more than $350,000, it has to go to a referendum.
yeah, yes, I understand.
Where the money's coming from.
I understand. But I can't imagine where we would be right today if that referendum was passed at whatever number it was, $15 million. I mean, I just
15 million.
magnitude of that versus where we are. It is night and day. So financially, oh my goodness, we lucked out big time with the referendum. But my last point is that on debt, it's cheap, no question about it. I agree. Vice Mayor, I think you can't get much lower. It's almost free. But my view has always been, why have debt if you don't need it? And only use debt when you do need it. And I don't think we need the debt, even as cheap as it is. So why carry it? That's my point. That was my input. Thank you very much.
Okay. Anything else from anybody before we turn it back? to
Now,
Mark?
I don't think an electric sign is a good idea either. There's no way to make an electric sign classy or understated.
No, we will shine light on it.
Yeah, I mean, we don't want people to even know they're passing the town hall when they go by.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, ma'am.
would we please put the sign on a future agenda, either in the next 2-3 meetings, and we can perhaps give Marshall some direction?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I'd
Because
like to,
it was a good suggestion.
thank you, and I'd like to, thank you, John. I'd like to just offer a small correction to my neighbor and wonderful colleague, Vice Mayor Bobby, that I also voted to not raise taxes last year or the year before. For the record, thank you.
My apologies.
Thank you. No worries. You don't need to apologize. And thank everyone and Mr. Lala and Town Manager Labadie for their hard work. This is a lot of work, and I feel so confident after 2.5 years up here that we are in really great shape and feel very blessed to have everyone on board.
Okay,
That's, thank you.
back to Marshall.
Yeah, so I'm glad I put the signs in there. Give me something to talk about. With their good financial condition. No, I'll make a change on that. Duly noted. I kind of circled it that because they were rotting and falling apart. And over the last few years, everybody's opinion on signs have been all over. So I'm glad you guys have given me the guidance to come up with a more appropriate figure for our next budget meeting and look at. I will get you a report back on the recreational fund and how that assessment works. I'm glad everybody has a very similar general philosophy on how we move forward. It will help Matt and I take those next steps in fine tuning these proposals and getting prepared for our budget workshops. And again, the FAB meeting next week and ours again on the 21st. So again, we are in a strong financial position. I am so pleased to be able to present that. Some of my colleagues probably aren't having the same tenor in their conversations as they kick off their budget meetings. So I'm glad we're where we're at. So this is good news. We got a little bit of work here and some lifting down the process, but we're in good shape. So I appreciate everybody's comments. They were very helpful. They truly are. And we'll fine tune it.
Okay, before we sign off, I noticed that Glenn is on here. Glenn, are you still with us?
Yes, I am.
Hey, Glenn.
I couldn't close the meeting without seeing if you had anything you wanted to say. You were so
Oh,
quiet.
you know, Marshall is doing a great job with those signs. And to me, it sounds like a really good budget. You got a healthy reserve and, you know, interesting financial conversation. I would suggest that I may not need to be part of these budget conversations because financially that doesn't seem to make sense unless there's a legal issue. You know, I mean, I love being part of this, but frankly, there's not much I can contribute to these kind of conversations. Now, there were a couple of times when there were questions that I thought, I kind of perked up and said, maybe there'll be a legal question, but that's up to the commission. I'm always happy to attend, but I'm always mindful about costs.
Yeah, it looks like we're gonna,
Appreciate that.
yeah, with everybody being generally in the same mindset, I think not need you. I think that would be good for us to save a few dollars.
Right, exactly. For the budget meetings. I mean, when you have your, obviously your final trim meetings, that's different, but your budget workshops, you got people like Vice Mayor Bobby that know more than his pinky about finances than I do.
As much as we love seeing you and having you around, we're going to take your advice and eliminate you for the next one.
Right.
Thank you.
And everybody, please stay safe.
Okay, you too, my friend.
Thank
Be
you.
well.
Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye. Okay, if there's nothing else, we will end the meeting.
See you everybody. Tuesday is our next meeting. Tuesday, 1:30, July 7th.
Back on Zoom.
Back on.
Back on Zoom.
Here we are at 2:54, and we will adjourn. Thank you all.
Thank you. Happy 4th.
July
Yes.
weekend.
Yes.
Enjoy and be safe.
Nice work.
Great job.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. all.
Good.
Be well.
Bye.
Bye-bye.